Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session on the Prisma Access Agent. So as part of this session, I will be covering the details of the Prisma Access Agent, the licensing, comparison with Global Protect, information regarding support for the Prisma Access Agent on the NGFW at a very high level. And we'll look also into the architecture of Prisma Access Agent, the authentication and how the gateway is selected and the tunnel is established. And we'll also look into some of the Prisma Access Agent specific features at a high level. Okay, so let's get started with an overview of the Prisma Access Agent. So Prisma Access Agent is a unified SASE agent that would deliver zero trust security. So it has a very simple deployment. We do have MDM support from day one, and we also have some feature for lifecycle management of the agent, like the stage rollout. We'll look into the details of this as we progress through the slides. The Prisma Access Agent comes with a cloud-based portal. So we will no longer have the Global Protect portal, but it will be more a cloud-based portal that has a persistent control channel with the end agents. Now, with that control channel, it gives us a better debuggability. We can actually do remote log collection, remote HIP report collection, and remote troubleshooting as well. That way, the RCA is, or the root cause analysis, the time taken for that is reduced and the productivity of the users is improved. The agent is also modular in nature. So we do support a modular upgrade of the agent, like say, for example, the OpSWAT packages. So we don't have to upgrade the entire agent. We can just upgrade the OpSWAT packages while the agent is still connected or has established the tunnel. We also have endpoint DLP capabilities on the agent, along with end user coaching for inline DLP and endpoint DLP related incidents as part of the first release. Of course, we do have the tamper proofing capability on the Prisma Access Agent, which means that users cannot tamper with the agent, cannot uninstall or modify files or registries of the for anything concerning the agent. And of course, you can achieve an always on enforcement with the agent deployed as such. So let's look at the Prisma Access Agent solution at a high level. So as I said, we will be replacing the portal with the endpoint manager that I'm just highlighting here. It's a cloud-based portal. It's called the Prisma Access Agent Manager or the Endpoint Manager. And of course, the Prisma Access deployments can be managed using both the Strata Cloud Manager as well as Panorama. So once the endpoint wants to establish a connection with the, or rather wants to establish a tunnel, so it authenticates with the EPM or the cloud-based portal. And once authenticated, the endpoint manager returns the agent configuration to the endpoint and also the cookie that the end agent can use for authenticating with the gateway and then establishing the tunnel. So the flow is very simple, that the end user authenticates first with the cloud-based portal, gets the cookie as well as the agent-related configuration, and the authentication to the gateway happens via the cookie. So the user just is entering the credentials only once or logging in only once, and then after that, of course, uses the cookie for authentication. Of course, there is an expiry timer for the cookie, post which there has to be a re-authentication and other things. And also you can see the flow here towards the cloud identity engine. So we do support cloud identity engine-based SAML and certificate authentication for this new agent. And that's why this flow where the authentication goes all the way until the CIE. Okay. From a licensing perspective, from the Prisma Access side of things, there is no change in the licensing. So the same mobile user license that was being used, or the MU license that was used for Global Protect, is going to be used for the Prisma Access Agent as well. In fact, with this license, you can do both Global Protect as well as the Prisma Access Agent. And again, the quantity is again the same as it was with Global Protect. So the unique users are counted in the last 30-day period, similar to what it was with Global Protect. Of course, there is a NGFW support as well that I mentioned in the beginning as part of the agenda. So there will be a new license queue for NGFW. It is available as an a la carte as well as the ELA. So again, here also the license, although there is a new SKU, it entitles the customer or the user to use both Global Protect as well as the Prisma Access Agent with the same license. So from the prerequisites perspective for the infrastructure, so the AMI and the SaaS agent versions are what are mentioned in the slide here where I'm hovering the mouse. So it has to be 10 to 10 or higher, the version that I mentioned here. And of course, 1120 C144 or higher in terms of the AMI version. The SaaS agent version has to be 510 101 or higher. Then from the NGFW perspective, the PanOS is minimum version is 11.2 that is needed. So from the difference in the way the configuration is managed for both Global Protect as well as the Prisma Access Agent, as you already may be familiar with Global Protect, first the agent authenticates with the portal, right? And then once the authentication is complete, it gets the agent configuration, right? And then the agent authenticates with the gateway, and then the tunnel is established with the gateway, right? In case of the Prisma Access Agent, so the portal is replaced by the cloud endpoint manager, the cloud-based endpoint manager. So once the agent authenticates with the endpoint manager, he gets the config, and then, of course, the tokens to authenticate with the gateway. So he doesn't have to enter the credentials again here to authenticate with the gateway, and then the tunnel gets established. So that's a difference in terms of the flow between both Global Protect and the Prisma Access Agent. Like I said, Prisma Access deployments do support management via both the Strata Cloud Manager as well as Panorama. So the Prisma Access Agent was released, or a general availability of the agent was made on the 15th of April. So this is the version 25.10.14 that was released for the agent. In terms of the feature comparison between Global Protect and Prisma Access Agent, from an authentication perspective, in this release or in this version, it is going to support SAML-based or CIE-based SAML authentication and CIE-based certificate authentication. And of course, from the connect methods, it's going to support the always on and the on-demand mode. Will not be supporting the pre-log on in the first release. It can be used in the tunnel mode and the agent proxy mode in terms of the Global Protect. In case of Prisma Access Agent, it will be the tunnel mode and the transparent proxy mode, right? And of course, from a management plane perspective, the Prisma Access Agent supports both SCM as well as Panorama, similar to Global Protect. Of course, enforcement or the points where we can deploy the Prisma Access Agent or the tunnel gets terminated is on the NGFW, Prisma Access, or a combination of both NGFW and Prisma Access, similar to what we have with Global Protect. From a traffic forwarding perspective, of course, we do have split tunneling by domain, address, and applications. Now, the split tunneling that we have in the Global Protect will be replaced with the forwarding profiles or the simplified forwarding profiles in the Prisma Access Agent. And again, here as well, the split tunneling can be done for the domains, addresses, and the applications, similar to what it was with Global Protect. We also have endpoint DLP support for peripherals, USB, network shares, and printers. And of course, you have the inventory that has visibility or the 360-degree visibility of the endpoint agent. So how does the authentication take place? So authentication method, like I mentioned, we support SAML and of course, client certificate-based authentication. Both of them will be CIE-based SAML and CIE-based client certificate authentication. And of course, we can have a SAML or client-cert authentication and SAML and client-cert authentication combinations. Again, please note that all of these are via the CIE. And of course, the gateway authentication is always using the authentication override cookie. Now, the authentication features that are not supported, of course, we will not be supporting in the first release, Radius, Kerberos, Smart Card Authentication, and LDAP as part of the first release. Of course, it is there in the roadmap, but in the first release, we do not support all of these authentication methods. From the NGFW support perspective, of course, we will have a new SKU. And with this license queue, you can use both GP as well as the Prisma or the Global Protect as well as the Prisma Access Agent, right? And of course, it will be available both as an a la carte and an ELA. And in the long run, it will be the ELA SKU that we have. And there is no change in the price. Of course, the enforcement is similar. With the similar checks on the server, there is nothing from a license enforcement perspective on the agent. Okay, so the licenses are installed on the firewall. You can have an auth code based activation on the firewall. And of course, for NGFW deployment, we need the SCM Essentials, which is enabled by default for all NGFW customers, right? Which also includes the endpoint manager, which is used for managing the configurations for the endpoint and visibility into the endpoint. So from a licensing page perspective on the NGFW, so right now, if you're using any of the versions of PanOS that we have, you can see it as a Global Protect gateway, but then the license will say gateway license for Prisma Access Agent. Like I said before, the same license can be used for both Global Protect as well as Prisma Access Agent. Once we have a newer version of the PanOS, which is by 11.2.5, the display will just change to gateway, but again, the description will be the same, that it is a gateway license for Prisma Access Agent. So coming to the endpoint manager for the NGFW deployments. So again, this endpoint manager is cloud hosted along with, within the Strata Cloud Manager, you can actually configure anything for the management of the Prisma Access Agent via the, SCM Essentials license version of the Strata Cloud Manager that you have. So it is a simple flow. You can see that in the workflows and the Prisma Access Agent. And of course, you can configure the user authentication, agent settings, and the other features on the agent. And again, the configuration is very similar to how it is on the SCM managed Prisma Access Agent. So again, all the gateway configuration should be managed independently on this Strata Cloud Manager, the Essentials version for the Prisma Access Agent, right? And the Prisma Access Agent Manager will manage the Prisma Access Agent configurations. So there is no config sync between what is configured on the Panorama versus what is configured on the Strata Cloud Manager, the Essentials license part, although the management is via the Panorama, and then this is just a micro app that's configuring the Prisma Access Agent. Okay, so when you add a gateway or delete a gateway on the Panorama, the same operation has to be performed on these Strata Cloud Manager as well for the Prisma Access Agent. So let's look at a high-level architecture of the Prisma Access Agent. So again, like we saw in the first slide, the user actually needs to have the endpoint manager FQDN on the agent, right? And then he should, when he connects, he will need to complete a SAML and or certificate authentication with the CIE. Once the authentication is complete, the agent gets the config, from the EPM, like all the agent settings, the authenticated user, and the gateway, the list of the gateways, the connect method, forwarding profile, and all of that configuration is got onto the end user's agent. And then the agent connects to the best available gateway, whether it is internal or external based on the configuration. Again, let's look at the endpoint manager. So the Endpoint Manager is a scalable cloud-based portal, like I said. So it gives us a single pane of glass view for the endpoints, right? And it is a unified view or the unified endpoint management from a single location that we can provide. And it provides us, full visibility into the agent rollout. Like I said, we have a feature called stage rollout for the lifecycle management of the agent. It gives us full visibility into how it is rolled out. And of course, you have actionable insights that is displayed on that inventory page. You can do remote troubleshooting, like I said before. And of course, you can also trigger upgrades or downgrades from the inventory page itself, sitting remotely. So already we saw the workflow. The user enters the FQDN and then does the authentication and then gets the config as well as the token, then authenticates with the gateway and then establishes the tunnel. So it's the same thing. And when he gets the configuration, he gets all the agent related configuration for the agent's operation. So this is the screenshot of the agent UI screen. So it's a very simplistic UI. The user can connect, and once connected, you can see the details of the connection while clicking on these 3 lines that you see here. From the installation perspective, you can do a manual installation, both on macOS as well as Windows, which is very similar to Global Protect. Of course, you can also have a JSON file in the same path as the installation package, with some of the pre-settings already done, like the connect method, etc. So this is an example of how you do the agent uninstallation. So on macOS, there is a script for uninstalling the agent that you can use. And of course, on the Windows, you can use the MSI exec command that is shown here. Again, all of these can be done only if anti-tampering is disabled, right? Or you are the administrator and know the password for the anti-tampering. So from an end user perspective, if anti-tampering is enabled, they cannot be able to uninstall the agent. We do have MDM support from day one. So this is a screenshot of the JAMF. Again, JAMF or JAMF for macOS can be deployed. So in the first release, we will be supporting Windows and macOS, right? And for macOS, we can use the JAMF MDM to deploy the agent. For Windows, we can use the Windows MDM or the Intune. So this is just an example screenshot of how to deploy the agent via the Windows MDM. So let's look at the infrastructure configuration of the agent, right? So I will be running you through the Strata Cloud Manager configuration, what we need to configure from the infrastructure perspective, or any other configurations that I'm going to demonstrate today will all be via the Strata Cloud Manager. So we go to the workflows and then, Prisma Access Agent, and then you can see the Access Agent setup. So you configure the FQDN here. So the first portal hostname that you see is for Global Protect. The second one is for the Prisma Access Agent. You can see that it has a .epm in the subdomain. So the gateways, again, configuration is similar to what it is with the Global Protect. So again, this is a screenshot that is showing us how to configure the FQDN for EPM here. Let's now look at authentication. Like I said, authentication, users should be able to authenticate to connect to the PAA, right? And then, of course, you have tokens that are provided. And of course, after the token expires, the user is expected to re-authenticate. And like I said, we support CI-based SAML, CI-based certificate, CI-based SAML and certificate, and CI-based SAML or certificate authentication, right? So again, how to configure SAML auth in the CI. So first, we do a directory sync for the directory. So here we've taken Okta as an IDP for SAML authentication as an example. Then we configure the authentication type for SAML. And for certificate authentication, we have to configure the CA chain in the CIE. And then, of course, you have to configure the authentication type for the certificate auth type, similar to what we did for SAML. And of course, we have to configure the authentication profile in the CIE and use that authentication profile in the Strata Cloud Manager. And then again, configure the user authentication. You have the option to choose all the 4 options that we discussed earlier. So let's now, once we finish the authentication, the agent has to select the gateway and establish a tunnel with the gateway, right? So how does the gateway selection happen? Again, once we perform the authentication, the gateway, we get the configuration of the gateway list. And first, the agent will do an internal host detection to see if it is on the internal network. If it is not, then it will do a best gateway selection. Again, there is a weight calculation that happens based on the time taken for the TLS handshake and then the gateway priorities. And based on the weights calculated, the agent will connect to the best available gateway, right? And again, the authentication for the gateway is via the auth override cookie. Okay, so the agent also comes with some CLI debug commands. Again, here there is just a demonstration of using that Prisma Access CLI or the PA CLI commands to connect to the best gateway and then, connect to one of those gateways as a selective method or a manual selection method. But again, this is how the best gateway selection happens. So now let's look at, so since we spoke about Strata Cloud Manager, I'll also cover the Panorama support for the Prisma Access deployments at a very high level, right? So Panorama support, of course, it is there for the Prisma Access as well as the NGFW deployments. We need a 5-to-1 infra for Prisma Access for us to be able to use the Panorama. Of course, in case of Prisma Access deployments, the Panorama managed Prisma Access deployments, there will be a cross-launch of the EPM micro app via which you will be configuring the Prisma Access agent, unlike the NGFW that we spoke earlier, where we configure things on the Strata Cloud Manager with the essentials, and then everything else is managed on the Panorama. Here from the Panorama itself, there will be a cross-launch of the micro app. And in the micro app, you will be configuring the Prisma Access Agent related parameters. Of course, PanOS version has to be 11.1. And of course, Cloud Identity Engine is mandatory. SAML and certificate auth will be supported. Again, here, this is just an example, right? Again, EPM or the Endpoint Manager or Prisma Access Agent Manager is a cloud-based service, right? And the user interface and all of the visual design, it's similar to the, SCM managed Prisma Access tenants. And here you can see it is a cross launch that happens from the Panorama, right? And of course, you can manage all of the gateway infrastructure, etc. settings in the Panorama. And the Prisma Access Agent Manager will manage only the agent config. So that's one difference from the NGFW management. Okay, so Prisma Access Agent Manager will read all the updated infra and common settings via the GPCS plugin that you will need to install on the Panorama, right? And again, all Panorama managed configs will be represented as read-only in the Prisma Access Agent Manager. So this is more from a management perspective. To keep it precise, there is going to be a micro app that gets launched when you configure the Prisma Access Agent from the Panorama. Only the agent configs are done on that micro app. All the other configurations are done on the Panorama from a management perspective. Okay, so again, this is just a diagram to show how the management takes place, right? And again, this is cross-launch in Panorama. You can do all of the gateway settings, infrastructure, everything in Panorama. Agent Manager will only manage the agent configs, right? And it also reads all the configurations made from the Panorama via the GPCS plugin. And any change on the Panorama will get synced to the Prisma Access Agent Manager, right? And all the Panorama config will show up only as read-only in that micro app that is cross-launched from the Panorama. for the agent manager configs. So this is where, this is a screenshot of the Panorama from where you can actually launch that PA agent manager. And then you can see the window that we saw earlier to configure only the agent related parameters here. So the cloud service plugin version is what you see here, 520H20. So with that, you can be able to manage Prisma Access Agent via the Panorama. So this is the UI of that micro app that gets cross-launched. Again, it's very similar to the Strata Cloud Manager UI. You can see the workflows and then Prisma Access Agent, and under setup, you can go and configure the Prisma Access Agent related parameters. And you also see the forwarding profiles. We'll look into the details of the forwarding profiles as we go by, but all of the traffic steering rules like the split tunneling, etc., are configured in the forwarding profiles. So again here, so the Prisma Access location and other things that we configured from Panorama, here we can see it only as a read-only in the infrastructure settings tab, right? And the EPM domain is the only one that you can configure because it is an agent manager, Prisma Access agent manager configuration, that only that can be done from the micro app. So again, user authentication settings, very similar to what we showed with the Strata Cloud Manager earlier. Again, this is the forwarding profile configuration. More details of the forwarding profile in the subsequent slides, but it's very similar to the SCM config. So now let's look at some of the new capabilities that are introduced in the Prisma Access Agent, right? So I'll look into each of these. So we will start with stage rollout, then we look at anti-tampering, then the remote troubleshooting capability, and then look at the forwarding profiles, right? Sorry that the remote troubleshooting is showing up twice, but we will look into the remote troubleshooting. We'll look into the modular upgrade briefly, and of course, endpoint DLP and end user coaching, and the project-based access. So from a staged rollout perspective, what exactly it is, right? When an IT admin wants to roll out an agent image, right? When initial deployment of the agent is done and all the, say it's an organization and all employees are using the Prisma Access Agent and we have a new version of the agent to be deployed, right? What the administrator would do is roll out the agent to one set of users, maybe the IT users, try it out on them, and when once successful, roll it out to the second set of users and then roll it out to the entire organization, right? So this is usually the way that the IT administrators do it. Now we have a capability, inbuilt capability in the agents manager, from where we can do this kind of a staged rollout, or the administrators can do the staged rollout, right? We can configure up to 6 rings in the stage rollout, right? Where from ring 0 and upwards. So we have to complete, the first ring, there is a cooling period of 72 hours. And only after a certain percentage that we configure of successful deployments can we move on to the next ring. And of course, the classification into the rings can be based on the OS or the users, right? And anybody who does not fall into those classifications goes off to the default ring, right? And anything that is not completed, but the percentage was, above the set percentage, like say you set 95% completion, and if 95% users complete the successful upgrade, then the remaining 5%, maybe if they were offline at that time, they will be put into the default ring and upgraded as part of the default ring. So that is about the staged rollout feature as such. So this is a diagrammatic representation. Say I have ring 0 with IT admins, ring 1 with engineering, and then of course the default ring where I include all the other people, and then I go ahead and schedule the stage rollout. This is just an example of a use case. Again, the cool-off period is 72 hours, right? And each ring will be soaked with that version for 72 hours, and also the stability of the agent can be measured. So it's kind of like the administrator can do a POC of that agent on each ring before he does the rollout on the final ring, where everybody else would be getting the new version of the agent, right? Again, like I said, at the end of the cooling period, if the ring pass percentage is below configured, then, the progression to the next ring does not happen, and there's an option to roll back as well. If it is above, of course, you progress to the next ring. right? I spoke about the default ring already, so I'm not elaborating more on that. But then on the UI screenshot that we have here, right, you can see in the inventory page how many of these have completed an upgrade, how many failed, and how many pending. Similarly, you can also see the details of the rings from that inventory page. So this is a demonstration of the stage rollout. So I go to the configuration for the staged rollout. So you can see a separate tab for staged rollout. So there I go ahead and configure the rings. Now in my ring 0, I have included the windows or separated the users based on the OS, right? So that's how I'm going. And there is nothing on the Mac OS. So I go ahead and, trigger or rather configure the ring for Windows separately and then the Mac OS separately. Now, again, I do have a ring one where I have included all of the Mac OS users, right? Anybody using anything other than, those will be put into the default ring, and anybody who did not get upgraded in those rings will also go to the default ring. Now, this is the inventory page where I have the status, right? You have 3 agents, and then you can see the option to start the upgrade progress, right? And of course, there is an earlier upgrade that was started and stopped. So you can see 1 has completed and 2 pending. You can view the ring details, etc., from the inventory page. Now let's come to the anti-tampering feature, right? So anti-tampering is a capability that we have with the new agent, where you cannot tamper with the agent. You see the anti-tampering status, right? It shows the file, process, registry, and service, which means that you cannot delete or uninstall the agent, delete files related to the agent, modify the registry, or start stop the process as such on the agent when the anti-tampering is enabled. So again, you can also prevent any kind of tampering of any of the agent related features, like say example the HIP, etc. No tampering can be done from the on the agent for this. Again, from a configuration perspective, it is there as part of the global settings where you enable the anti-tampering and then configure an anti-tamper password, which only the admin will have. The end users will not have the anti-tamper password, and they cannot tamper with the agent. So just demonstrating the Mac OS anti-tamper protection. Now here the user tries to uninstall the agent. He again tries it with the root permissions, but still he will not be able to uninstall because the anti-tamper kicks in. That is what is getting showed here. So now he tried with the root, but still not able to do it. Anti-tamper kicked in. Right now he uses the launchctl stop to stop the process. You can see that the process is not getting killed and the agent is still in the connected state. So when you see the status, you can see, all of the things enabled. Now let's look at the Windows anti-tamper. Again, here we'll try to uninstall the agent. You will see anti-tampering messages throwing up and the agent cannot be uninstalled. You see the anti-tampering protection message, which prevented the uninstall of the agent. Now he's trying to delete one of the agent files that cannot be deleted as well. Now let's look at remote troubleshooting, right? So in this, we will take a look, what actually we can do as part of remote troubleshooting. Like say example, now the hybrid work is the new norm, right? And you have users connecting remotely, right? But if suppose for some reason they're not able to connect via the tunnel, then they have to collect the logs and share it with the admin, or they have to carry their laptop to the admin for the admin to debug and help them get connected back to the via the tunnel, right? Or the VPN. Now with the Prisma Access Agent, the administrator can actually do a remote shell into the end user system. Once the end user allows the administrator to log in, or rather do the remote shell, the administrator can log into the remote shell and then execute a few debug commands on the shell and then figure out what's wrong with the agent and then help the user to connect back. At the same time, the administrator can also collect remote logs agent logs basically, and also HIP reports, and then diagnose, what the issue could be from those logs as well. Also, you can do a remote upgrade and downgrade of the agent, like I mentioned below. All of these options are available. So let's do, this is the inventory page. So it has the details of the agents, how many of them are connected, how many are disconnected, how many offline, etc. And of course, it has the individual agents. So once you click on each of those agents, you can do that remote troubleshooting. Now I'm just going to demonstrate the remote troubleshooting and how the remote upgrade of the agent is done, because he has a older agent version which was not enabling the end user to connect. So now from the inventory page, the administrator basically clicks on that end user device, link there, and then you see all the details of that end user system that is there, including the ADEM score. Now he tries to do a remote shell into the end user's system. The agent is in the disconnected state. He has granted permission to the administrator to do the remote shell. As you can see here, he gets a notification to approve, he approves, and then the administrator is able to do that remote shell and execute the debug commands only. So he's checking for the status of the agent, the status, and then he realizes that, the agent is authenticated, but then the tunnel is not getting established because of, and from the error code and the debugging, he realizes that the end user is running an older version of the agent, and then he triggers an upgrade of the agent sitting remotely. Now, once the agent is upgraded, the end user will be able to connect and establish the tunnel connection with the gateway. Right? He is disconnecting from the remote shell and now triggers an upgrade. So once the upgrade is complete, the end agent will be moving to the connected state. Right? Now the end agent is in the connected state after the upgrade is done. Right? And you can see that the upgraded version of the agent. And the inventory page also shows that the agent is in the connected state. And all the details, and the version is also updated to the new one. Okay, now how do we debug agent issues? Again, there will be a folder or a zip file of the logs. So you have multiple logs there, the system logs. It contains logs of the system, of the processes that are running, right? And of course, the dumps will give you details of the processes. And of course, DEM gives you the ADEM logs. And of course, you can collect logs with respect to the CLI commands or the UI in those when you go by the username logs. And of course, the machine info will give you the OS related information, and Packly output, if you have executed any of the PACLI commands, it will give you the output over there. Of course, agent logs has the PAs.log, which has most of the information. The others are self-explanatory. I'm not going into the details of that. So now let's look at forwarding profile, right? So again, with the forwarding profile, we have all of the traffic steering rules in one place, right? Including the enforcer, the endpoint traffic policy enforcement, and of course the split tunnel as well, right? And it has a better view in terms of the configuration, as well as because all the traffic rules are configured at one location, and you also have a better debuggability view at the end agent. There are the PACLI commands that I was talking about that we can use to see what path, what configuration is there from or pushed on the agent, right, from a split tunnel perspective. And then you can also, or split tunnel or any forwarding rules perspective, right? And then you can also see what path the traffic is taking from those CLI commands, right? Again, I've spoken about all of these things, right? You have the split tunnel for all of those functionality. I'll show that in a demo as well. And of course, the traffic enforcement You can do the disable local subnet access, the endpoint traffic policy enforcement, and also the enforcer configuration from the forwarding profiles. Right, so this is an example, a screenshot of the configuration where you have the a traffic enforcement that we can configure. So video streaming is configured to go via direct interface, and some SAML authentication via the direct interface, and everything else goes via the tunnel, right? And that's how the configuration is. And after configuring the forwarding profiles, you reference the forwarding profile in the access agent configuration in here, where you have the option to choose the forwarding profile from the drop-down list, right? This becomes available after you configure the forwarding profiles there. So let's look at a demonstration of forwarding profile. Now here there is a Zoom that is excluded from the tunnel, right? And all other traffic should be going via the tunnel. So that's the configuration that is done. So the application Zoom traffic is excluded from the tunnel. Right, so we have those applications, the two FQDNs as well that are excluded. So that can be seen here. So at the end, we have to configure, or rather all of the Zoom traffic should be taking the direct interface, and all the other traffic should be traversing the tunnel, right? So this is the forwarding rule for the Zoom that has been configured to go via the direct interface. Okay, now we see from the demo, so the split tunnel configuration that is done using the traffic show command. And then we see the PACLI traffic log command. And with that log command, you can see that the Zoom is taking the direct interface. Again, from the show command that is there here, you can see what has been configured is exactly what you see on the agent, right? Zoom is taking direct interface. Again, here, I'm grepping by the Zoom, and all of the data and DNS traffic for Zoom is going via the direct interface. So this makes it easier for us to debug things with the forwarding profile as well. Then we go to the modular upgrade. Like I said, we can do an upgrade of the OpSWAT packages without us having to upgrade the entire agent or wait for the next release of the agent to get the latest OpSWAT package. So that again can be done on the Prisma Access agent by the Prisma Access CLI. So here I do a HIP update and then check the HIP version, and then you can see the HIP has been upgraded. You can also do the get logs command from the CLI, and then you can see that the agent has been upgraded, or you already had the latest version, then it will indicate to you that you already have the latest version. So basically you are upgrading the HIP packages without disconnecting from the agent or without upgrading the agent as such. Okay, so we do have the endpoint DLP and end user coaching capability as well. So from an endpoint DLP perspective, we do support, USB printers and network shares as peripherals, where you can prevent, files from being copied, any file from being copied, or files that match certain, sensitive information. Like say example, you have a personally identifiable information, files that you don't want to be copied onto the peripheral devices, or you don't want, say a functional specification to be copied by the employees onto the peripheral devices, right? So that can be done with the endpoint DLP. Of course, you also have an end user coaching capability for the inline DLP as well as the endpoint DLP events. Of course, this is what is supported in the first release of the agent, and there will be further enhancements as well. Then we already have a feature called project-based access, where a user gets access to the resources based on the project that he's connecting to. So on the left, you see Project Yoshimite. On the right, you see Project Redwood. So based on those projects, you can see the gateways that the user can connect to are also different, right? Like say example, on Redwood, you see Japan, Singapore, and those gateways, whereas on Yoshimite, you will not see all those locations that you see there, right? It's only US-based locations, right? And at the same time, the IP address that the user gets is also different on these two projects. So this is more of an ITES kind of use case where a user has connectivity, or rather works on more than one project. So he can access only resources corresponding to the project that he's logged in, and cannot use project B's or cannot access project B related resources when he's connected on project A, right? So that's basically at a high level what project-based access does, while it gives separate gateways, separate IP addresses based on the project.